How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited for today.
Me too. I'm super excited to learn from you and get some advice out there for the viewers because obviously even though I've transitioned from corporate into becoming a full-time entrepreneur. I don't want, that's not always the case for everybody. Some people still want to have their full-time or part-time job or that's the only thing that or that's the only thing they prefer to do. So I know from my own personal experiences how it is being a young Black woman in a leadership role and being mistreated. So I'm super excited to talk to you about that today. But go ahead and give us a brief introduction about, who you are, where you're located, and what you do.
Hi, everyone. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Jessica Watkins Ogunnaya, and I am based out of Seattle, Washington. I am a career development coach for women of color who are looking to advance in their career, specifically more so in the corporate industry as well, like healthcare and things like that. And we really focus on how do you get promoted and paid? How do you position yourself to get in a place to be able to level up in your career and in your compensation?
I definitely love that. Funny, congratulations again. I didn't know how to say your new last name, so I was like, let me just stick to what I know.
Don't worry about it. It took me a while.
Yeah, I saw you updated in your bio, and I was like, look, I do not want to butcher it at all. Let me just go ahead. But okay, so I love that. So I'm super excited for us to just dive in and learn from you because we know the struggle of what it's like being a woman of color or minority in any type of corporate role, any type of, and not even necessarily corporate, any type of organizational role usually comes with these trials and tribulations, and more so for us than for any other ethnicity or even, I will even say gender too, because women are always going through things. So tell us a little bit more about your origin story and what made you create your business. And I'm doing multiple things, but tell us more about your origin story. What made you create, Coach by Jess or Coach with Jess, and your current position in the corporate world?
Yeah, so a little bit about me, as I mentioned, born and raised in Seattle. From a career perspective, I actually started really early. So I was applying for my first job on my 16th birthday, actually in an interview.
Oh, wow.
And reason being, it's well, why? I think a lot of us look to get a job at that age because we want our own money. But I think my background is a little different. My dad was actually diagnosed with cancer when I was in the 8th grade. And throughout my early high school time, he was unable to work and he was still going through the process of getting his disability pay and all of that stuff. So for 3 years, it was we were living off of little to no income that he had saved up. So when I turned 16, I applied for my first job. If you've ever heard of Limited Too, it's like the young girl store where you can get cute clothes for young girls. That was my first job. And then within a month, I was not working for me, not my vibe. So then I actually applied to work at Nordstrom, which I've actually been there ever since and have gotten a ton of experience through this journey that I've been on with them. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it started out. As far as my experience throughout the last almost 20 years, I have played various roles across different parts of the organization. So I've been in sales, I've been in customer service, I've been in project management, I've been in leadership roles. So the role that I'm in right now is actually a director role, and I've been a director for almost 6 years. Wow, the time is flying. In various different parts of the organization: merchandising, technology, e-commerce, now within loyalty and gift cards. So my experience is kind of broad around different types of roles and different types of experience. But yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Sounds like an amazing story. Honestly, first, sorry to hear about your dad. My husband's father, he passed away from cancer as well. So definitely understand that. I just hate cancer. Seriously, it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and just super sad. But I think that's a phenomenal story in the sense of how crazy it is that your second job in your life is still, I mean, not the same role, obviously. You pivoted in so many ways, but to still be with the same company from that long, not only does it show that that's a good organization to work for, but it also shows your dedication to hone in on your skills and to advance, especially when going through negative situations that I'm sure probably have,
Oh
arrived
yeah.
while you were in. So I can't wait to
For
like talk more about that.
sure,
But
for
I love
sure.
that. That's a like I didn't know that. And we've
Mhm.
talked, and I've actually known Jessica a little bit longer from working together for a bit. But it's like I didn't know that about you. I knew that you were a director at Nordstrom's, but I obviously didn't know like the personal story behind it. So it's kind
Yeah.
of nice to put that together.
Mhm.
So I think to like after like hearing about your background story and just knowing more about you, it's really good to start off with just kind of defining these like layman terms for people, because a lot of people don't know what WOC is.
Yeah.
So tell us how you would define that.
Yeah, so I'll give you the full definition, the real one, because I think there is a misconception. I think a lot of times, even when I'm talking to potential clients, they think that women of color just mean Black women or Latina women, and it's actually much broader than that, right? The easy way I'll define it is anyone who is not a white woman. Is basically the easiest way if you just want the context. But if you want the full definition and list, it's Black, it's Latina, it's Asian, it's American Indian, it's Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, or anyone who is of mixed race.
Yeah.
That is the technical definition of women of color.
No.
Who I predominantly work with tend to be, just based on my client base, not to say that I'm not open to larger, it tends to be Black women, Latina women, and Asian is typically who I support within my business.
Yeah, I love that. So I know when I first kind of got introduced to like WOC, I always thought that it was always referring to African American women. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like within my corporate career and then starting to deal with diversity, inclusion, and equity issues, I started doing my own research more and realized that it's really all minorities, like you just said.
Correct.
It's not just this specific group, it's all of us. And I think there even today tends to be that breakdown still of people only thinking that it's Latinas or African American.
Correct.
So how do you, when you interact with, like, this is kind of a sub question for that, but when you've interacted with people that have used that term incorrectly, how do you normally like check them when they're saying, oh, that's just for that type of group, or
Mm-hmm.
so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth? How do you like pull them back in and make sure you like give them the direct the right definition of it?
I think it depends on the context of the conversation. I think if it's someone who thinks that that term is just for them, right, there's a little bit more sensitivity in that space around like women of color is just me. So
Yeah.
you should be marketing to me versus it being like someone who's not a woman of color being like, oh, women of color is generalized just Black women or Latina women, right? So definitely if it's someone who is unsure that I'm having conversation with as a client, I just kind of reiterate like, hey, I usually tell women when I get on a consultation, I reiterate that in the conversation, like, hey, I work with women of color and here's what that means. So that it's not me correcting them. It's more so just informing them as we're having conversation. So I try
Love
to do
that.
it that
I
way.
love
Yeah,
that. You
yeah,
lead the conversations, make sure that they have that better understanding with you. So
exactly.
I love how you emphasize it's not correcting, you just
Yeah.
leading them, you're giving them the right information, and
Mhm.
that will allow them to have a better understanding of what it is. So I love that you said that. So how are some ways that women can stand up for themselves, well, women of color can stand up for themselves in the workplace when they feel as though they're not being heard?
Mm. I describe this in two ways. It's the what and the how. And what it really comes down to is two things, your confidence and your communication, right? Like, yes, there are going to be times when you're going to use your voice and someone may disregard it or downplay it. But I think the thing that I try to help my clients do is instead of trying to figure out how do we correct everyone else, what are the things that we can control and how do we address that first, right? So, for example, if I'm frustrated about something that I'm experiencing on my team or with my manager or with a peer, how am I addressing that? Am I addressing it? And what does that look like? So I think it's being really clear around, knowing who your audience is, what the issue is, and getting clear on how do you articulate the experience that you're having and the support that you need. It's right. It's one going into like, how do you describe the problem? How do you describe how it's impacting you? And how do you describe what support you need to see the change that's required, right? Whether it's impacting you individually, your team, your advancement in your career. So start with the communication on the what and the how. And then I think it's practicing that confidence. And this comes over time. Like anyone who's new and starting in their career, you're not going to be good at this immediately. And so advocating yourself takes skill and time. And so I always tell people, find your network. And I know we're going to talk about this as we go into it, so I won't go too deep into that, but like, how are you finding resources to help you work through those scenarios so that you're not feeling like you have to figure it out on your own? That's the one thing that I wish I had, and this is why I started my business, is as me being a young Black woman coming up in corporate America, I can think of 2 Black women who are in higher leadership roles within the space that I was in, not even in the space they weren't on my team, but within the company that I knew existed, that had gone through that before me that I could leverage. And that's very few and far between, right? And so I was on my own, and I had to learn the hard way. I failed a lot. I fell on my face a lot. And so how do you find resources that can help you as you continue to advance? For sure. That's like, control what you can control your messaging and find people that can help you.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you broke down everything, because if you've been following, well, you probably, you know, a little bit from our discussion, but for the viewers here, I myself have had experiences where negative situations arrived in corporate America, where I worked for an organization for 6 years and really worked my way up the ladder.
Oh,
my grandmother is walking around, so I was like, shh.
You can't hear her. You're good.
Okay, cool. So my own situation, and like working my way up the ladder in this organization. And I always say it was so crazy because I started as the lifeguard of the pool at this organization because I was still at school, at university. And when I was in the lifeguard role, I kid you not, I feel as though all the like senior leaders, it's a rehabilitation center, so there is different varieties. Most people are like, how did you work your way up at a place that has a pool? But it was a rehabilitation hospital. So when I was in the lifeguard role, I kid you not, they would look at me and be like, I think that they would be like, oh yeah, good, you're doing a great job in this role, like you're supposed to be here. And then as I positioned myself and transitioned into working in the public relations and marketing department, and then moving into the volunteer services manager position, that's where a lot of the discrimination really came into play. Whereas now, instead of, oh, you're doing a great job, you know, this is a great job for you down in the lifeguarding role. Now it's, oh, how did I get this role? You know, oh, you're young. Oh, you're young, you're Black. How did you get it? What did you do? Oh, you're too young for this role, and getting it on a repetitive type basis. So I remember being in that situation and not knowing what to do either. And situations just kept arising, worse situations that, just like you said, I fell on my face so many times because I did not know what to even do or how to advocate for myself. Yeah. So that leads us to like our next conversation of how can women of color build up their networks to have somebody to go to when that situation arises? Because I know I did not have a clue. I didn't even know where to start or how to even build that network for myself.
Yeah, here's the thing that I love about where we are now versus where we were when I started. It is so much easier to network. We have social media, right? Like there's been a ton of conversation around diversity and inclusion with a lot of corporations. And so they've created like employee resource groups where, you know, different races or women in tech and things like that can come together and create community. I would say you can approach it 2 ways. One, what's within the company that you work for? What is already existing, right? So if it's an ERG group, if it's mentorship, like what does that look like? The one thing that I love about something that I had witnessed a few years ago is that it didn't exist at this time. And a group of Black girls just started getting together and having lunch every month, or would reach out to like, hey, I see you, girl. Like, can we connect for coffee? So I think, you know, you have 2 options. Leverage what's already existing. If those ERG groups are there, if they're offering mentorship, or if you see someone that you feel like would be a good mentor for you, reach out, build relationship, network. Like that is the best way to make sure that you're building community. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this, but outside of work, there are plenty of places where you can build community outside of work of people that are in the same field as you, right? Like, and you can leverage those folks to help you as you're facing some of these things that we're going to be talking about, for sure.
Love that. I definitely remember in the organization I worked for, they did not have a diversity, equity, and inclusion group. So when I started going through my own situations and was trying to find that group, I realized that they didn't have one. So I was like, hey, can I start this? Because this clearly needs to be something that is, we need to have this here, because people, I know I can't be the only one in this organization of 500 plus people going through it. There's no way. And I remember them coming back and saying, yeah, we have one. We just haven't met in over a year.
then you don't have one.
Exactly.
Then it doesn't exist.
Exactly. So like I'll never forget that. They're like, yeah, we have one. You can join it. So when are y'all gonna start having consistent meetings? Because this is clearly a problem. This is why there is issues here of diversity and equity and women of color being mistreated, or not even just women, even men, you know, even just seeing like the minority men getting paid significantly less than what the white males, you know, are getting paid. And now it's like in this day and age, it's all about like having that audacity. Like what my coach, she says that,
Have
you know,
the
I need to pull out her
audacity.
Chad energy. She's like, Bumpus, I'm not Latisse today, I'm Chad. You know, if the
I
white,
love her, by the way. I saw
yeah,
that
she's so
story. I was like,
awesome.
yes, the audacity. Yes, that's it. That's the energy we need.
Seriously. And she's right, you know, and you don't even think of it in that manner until it's in your face consistently. And you're like, yeah, you're right. These white males don't have to lower their price. They don't get asked for discounts. They don't know it's $100,000. It's $100,000, you know? And then for us, it's always, oh, can you get a discount? Can you do this, that, and the third? So I thought, you know, it's crazy. This is why it's so important to have those networks that you can connect with, because being around like-minded people can help you know that you deserve so much more and you shouldn't be treated in that manner.
And we've been conditioned. I think this is the thing for me, right? Like no one has come out and been like, you can't go for that job. We've been conditioned to limit ourselves to a certain extent. Like sometimes they do say that. Let me be clear. I'm not saying all the time, but we've been conditioned to limit ourselves and our capability and ability to grow within a company because of these unrealistic like guardrails that have been created intentionally or unintentionally. So when you go back to saying like have the audacity, yeah, I'm gonna have the audacity. I'm gonna apply for this job because I'm qualified. Like if you have the confidence behind you with that audacity, you'd be surprised at how far you can go. It really comes down to like control what you can control. You can't control nobody else. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't serve you, find your way out, right? Like there are other options out there. There are other opportunities out there, but you got to first believe in you before anybody else can believe in you. And that's where I think we have an opportunity to do some real work. And that's what I love working with my clients on for sure.
I think we talk about this a lot on all the lives, but I think just in general in life, like you just said, it truly is mindset first and everything else would follow. So whether that be in your work, your personal life, whatever it is, like if you don't have the mindset to match the results or the life or the desires that you truly have for yourself, you're never going to be in alignment with it. You're never going to be on the same frequency of those things, because everything is truly energy. So I totally agree with like mindset first and everything else will follow. And so many people hate to hear that because they don't believe it, but it's like once you really shift your mindset and start noticing the life-changing things that can happen to you, then you're like, oh wow, it really was my mindset all along.
And it's the hard, but here's the thing that people also don't realize, that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Changing your mindset, changing your beliefs, changing how you were raised, changing what you experience and how you think about it and how you see yourself is the hardest part. So like my coach, she says all the time, she's like, Jessica, it's 80% belief and 20% implementation.
Yeah.
And when you put it in that context, right? Like, yeah, you got to work. I'm not saying you ain't got to work. You got to work. But at the same time, if you think about it, like, okay, if I work more so on me and what I can control and what I think about myself and what I believe about myself, then I'm unstoppable, right? Like nobody can stop me at that point. So yeah, I totally agree.
We were just having this conversation. Me and a couple of my friends were having this conversation last night along the lines of that you have to, whatever you believe in is going to come to fruition. So I always say like what you think, feel, and believe will become your reality. So I love how that, again, it goes back to that mindset and knowing that everybody, just like you were saying, that it comes down to that belief shifting mindset situation. So it's like knowing that everybody is going through something, you know, everybody has a different upbringing. Everybody has different values, moral ethics. And that's that has contributed to why they are how they are, as well as obviously media and the circle that you keep also contributes to why you have the beliefs or you react the way you do. So I love how everything always comes back to mindset, and people hate that, but it truly
But what
does.
makes us different, that's our magic.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we contribute something completely different. Yes, we are not the majority. Yes, we are the minority. Yeah. But think of what flavor you're bringing to the environment that you're in, because your background is different, your upbringing is different, your experience is different. Like, right? Like use that as your secret sauce as to how you show your contribution in the company and organization that you're working for.
That's the magic.
That's the magic.
Love that. So what are some skill sets that women of color can use to advocate for themselves on a daily basis within corporate America and the workforce?
I know we talked about communication. That is really key. I said communication and connection, right? Like anytime that I think about an experience that I had, it was because of how I displayed my work and my contributions and the connections that I had made. Right. So like how I show up every day, I always start with me first, right? My skills around, how I deliver, how do I set my goals based on the company objectives and what we're doing? How do I make sure that I'm showing up as my best self in my communication, in my partnerships, in collaboration? And so really my old boss used to say, get really good at doing your job. Like if you do nothing else, be really good at the job that you do. And whatever the skills vary depending on the type of field that you're in, right? Communication, whether that's verbal, whether it's written, that is key. And then building the connections and how you work with people. I think one of the things that I appreciate is that like I've worked with thousands of people and I still have connections with them today. They will literally call me and say, hey, Jess, there's an opportunity that on this team or at this company, and I think you'd be a great fit. And it's not based on what I'm doing today. It's based on the experience that they had with me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago. And it's consistent. So get yourself positioned in a place to where you can show what you're capable of, that you can show that you're a great partner and you're good at building relationships. And then that is how those skills naturally just come to show across, to your boss, your partners, whoever.
Yeah. I always say that confidence comes as you do. So when you really show up for yourself and keep doing what you need to do, like you said, just really hone in on the skills that you have and do your best job and whatever it is, whether you're working in corporate, whether you're an entrepreneur, just really become the expert in that field or, industry so that you can pivot and also just position yourself as that industry leader, the expert. That also kind of leads us into the next question of, you said communication is one of like the best ways or best skill sets that they can have. But what about like the nonverbal ways? Because I've had so many times in the past where it was either like, before they would say your tone, but now it's like your mannerisms, you need to watch how you like, you're too direct or you're standing too tall, you're having the audacity, you're having your Chad moment or whatever that may be. So what are some nonverbal ways that can help women not, still stand their ground, but not be viewed as being that combative or angry minority woman, which oftentimes gets associated with having like direct tone or mannerisms as a woman of color?
Yeah, and I can think back to an experience I had. So this was years ago, but at the time, I think I was in my first or second manager position, and one of the new folks that had came onto the team that took my previous job went to HR and my manager about me, saying that my body language was intimidating and that it was making it hard for her to do her job. Now, as Black women, we know we talk with our hands, but I ain't never been like, girl, it's never been any of that, right? Yeah. And so, one thing that I try to do from knowing how I show up in my body language, like I can be in a meeting today and someone can look at my face and be like, oh, she is not happy. Yeah. That's just who I am. Or she does not agree. That's just and my boss will be like, Jess, I see you don't agree. And so the reality is that you're going to be you. I think, what I would say is, knowing the nonverbal piece, if there are mannerisms that you have, you should 100% be mindful. If you talk with your hands, how do you acknowledge that? Like I tell my team, hey guys, just so you know, like I'm very animated. I talk with my hands. It's not, it doesn't mean I'm upset. It doesn't. So I call it what it is to the folks that I work with so that they know that that's how I am. But I think as far as the confidence and just how to do it non-verbally, I think eye contact is very important. You can tell someone's confidence in their body language, right? So like if you're sitting up straight and you're like, I can have a direct conversation with you. I can look you square in your eye. I can still smile and get my point across. Like I can be direct without being, I'm going to say it, bitch, or I can be direct without being aggressive. Like figure out what that looks like for you. I never try to give people the prescriptive, like sit up straight, make sure your eyes are like, because everybody is different. So you have to have your own secret sauce based on your style, but make sure if there are things that you do that may make people feel uncomfortable, whether it's right or wrong. Sometimes I've worked with some people where it's like, oh, you're really aggressive, and it's for real. But call it so that people know that it's like, this is just how I communicate, and create an open space so that if people are uncomfortable or feel uncomfortable, that they can have that dialogue with you.
So in your personal story that you had after the person went to HR, did you go and have just that direct communication with them to make them feel more comfortable? Or how would you address a situation like that, you know, if it's already been brought to HR as being combative when in reality they didn't even address it to you?
Yeah, so my store manager at the time, pulled me into the room. I had no idea this was a thing, and was giving me my review, and he brought it up in my review. He had it in my annual review, and this was the first time that anybody had ever had this type of conversation with me. And so first of all, I had to address him. I'm like, you're absolutely not putting that in my review if we haven't even had a conversation about it and you haven't heard my side of the story. So that was like battle number one. Like, how do I get him to stand down? Because this is absolutely not the case. Have you ever witnessed me in this type of communication? You're around us all the time. And if you did, you never talked to me about it, number one. And if not, then you have no valid reason to put that in my review. So he was first. And then after that, I had a conversation with HR because I'm like, hey, like, you guys should have directed this person to come and have a direct conversation with me first before you just assumed that she was telling you the truth.
Yeah.
And then I did have a conversation with her. And it wasn't to be aggressive. It was just more so to directly say, like, hey, if ever in the future you feel as though I am doing something to make you uncomfortable or make you feel a certain type of way, let's have a discussion. That doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with you. That doesn't mean that I'm going to apologize, right? If it's something that I didn't do wrong, but at least we can build the rapport and relationship with each other so that maybe what you may be misinterpreting as me being aggressive is just me talking.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just my way of communicating. So yeah, we did. And we have a great relationship now.
Nice. That's good to hear. Your story is so similar to a story of mine. Yeah, not in the sense of me having a nonverbal interaction with somebody, but in the sense of them putting something in my review that had not been addressed with me prior to the review. So
How
same
many
thing that
times?
you did. Yep.
How many times? Listen, for those listening, if this is you and this is happening to you, don't you ever let somebody put something in your review or impact your compensation, but based on something that they did not have a conversation with you about. Period.
Exactly.
And if you need help with how to do that, you need to call me.
After hearing your story, I was like, wow, it just made me feel better to know that I did handle it in an appropriate manner, because I did exactly what you did, like addressed it with my supervisor, and then also went back to HR, because how can you put something in because the review, you know, not only does that negatively like reflect your work ethic, but it also, yes, at the organization that I work for, it affects your pay, and it also affects like the bonus incentive that they would give us annually.
Correct.
So no.
You're not playing with my bag now. That's
exactly
what we're not going to do. But you know what? I think the thing of it is like, yeah, we addressed it, but I know so many people that don't, because they don't know how. They are afraid to. They're afraid to be retaliated against. They're not confident in going to the conversation, so they just rather not. And so, like, there are ways that you can do it. And that's why I say seeking support and having someone, whether it's a mentor, a coach, or whoever, or someone, you know, who's in some type of leadership role that you worked with in the past, is important. You should always have support to help you address these things as you go through them, if you're not confident to just do it on your own.
Yeah, I agree. And it is so hard and scary to have those difficult conversations in any type of business setting, but it really is even harder when you feel as though that you are going to be reprimanded and that you could lose your job, when that honestly should never be the case. But I know that it can happen because people are out here not, businesses are out here not with integrity, you know, a lot of them, but there are a lot that do have integrity.
There are a lot that are. Yeah. But you better CYA is what I tell people.
What's CYA?
As we cover your ass.
Okay.
Document everything. Like that situation that I went through, as soon as we had the conversation, I went and wrote down everything that was discussed. On this date, at this time, this person and I had a conversation. Here's what was said. Here's were the takeaways. Here were the next steps. And you keep that paper trail, because in the event, let's say they didn't, but let's say that someone retaliated against me for that. and I did lose my job, or my pay was docked, and I didn't have the details to go back and say, hey, like this is what happened and you guys shouldn't be doing that, then I could have been screwed. So make sure if you find yourself in any uncomfortable situation or just any situation where you're like, I better write this down, do it.
Yeah. Love that. Definitely.
Yeah.
And so I'm just getting more reassurance that I'm so glad I'm not there anymore, but I'm just getting so much reassurance from you that I really did go about it in the right manner, even though it was so like nerve-wracking, and literally every day was like coming home with tears in my eyes, because it's like here you are trying to stand up for yourself, but you're still being mistreated, and it's just a weird situation. So how do you think that women of color can overcome like imposter syndrome in these incidences? Because that is a big one.
Imposter syndrome is like, I might have a different opinion on it.
Okay.
The reality is we all face it. Yeah. And this is real for like whether you're a woman of color or not, right? Yeah. Like everybody faces imposter syndrome. It's different for us because of the backstory, the background, and the reasons why. It looks a little different, feels a little different. But I think the thing of it is that, first of all, you have to recognize that you're going to experience it. It's going to come up. So it's not about the fact of like, how do I prevent having imposter syndrome? You're not going to. Exactly. Be okay with that. It's more so around what are some things that I can do when it starts to come up to work myself through that scenario, whatever it is, whether it's talking to somebody, whether it's just like I have practices that I do for myself when I'm like, I'll get in a meeting sometimes, like we were prepping for a board meeting and I had to give my president a presentation to meet with the board, right? And in my gut, I'm like, oh, is this good? It's going to the board. Like, I think I didn't do it right, or this is going to be terrible. And I, in my own mind, had going to this thing like, am I qualified to be doing decks for the board? Like, I don't know. And I had to stop. And I was like, okay, Jessica, if he didn't trust you to do it, he wouldn't have asked you. So what about this is making you feel like you're not qualified to produce the documents that your president asked you to do? And so sometimes, and I had to talk myself out of that. So what I usually do is, the first thing is I just write it down. Everything that I'm thinking, right? I literally just jot it down. I don't think that I'm good enough. I don't think that they believe in me. I don't think that I can do this, whatever it is. You need to get it out of your mind. That is step number one. And then you need to course correct and write the opposite of that. I am qualified and here's why I can do this. And so it's more so of how do you work through those thoughts. I think another thing, and I talked about mentorship and having a coach or whatever, whoever your person is, have someone that can help you walk through it. Because sometimes doing it ourselves, we're too far in our head that we are just like, we're going to spin. We're going to be on the hamster wheel. And so having someone who can help you kind of pull it apart, helps also realize like, oh, maybe I am tripping. But know that you will deal with imposter syndrome. It's how do you deal with imposter syndrome that becomes the important piece.
Exactly. And the more you recognize it, the better able you are to not eliminate them. Like you said, they're still going to show up. Even when you are at your best mindset, space, it's still going to come up, but you'll be better able to like literally it's like the minute that negative thought comes in, you're like,
you're like,
that is not me.
This is my journal. I literally write.
Love it.
I will go and just get it out for sure.
I do the same thing. I love journaling. I think it not only, it helps for anybody, not only just with imposter syndrome and getting those thoughts off, but like with manifesting the life that you desire, with actually getting your work list together. Because when I say I have like 400 different planners and then all these different journals, and then the question journal that I share every day on my story, like I love that one too, because it's like get your mind thinking, encourages you to get out of those just negative or doubtful mindset, that frugality mindset, like putting yourself in just a space of positive energy. Because like we said, everything is energy. So if you're going to put out those bad vibes, you're going to receive those bad vibes.
100%.
So what are your thoughts about like microaggressions in the workplace? Because I felt like when 2020 hit, and I will say I've felt so many different ways about the pandemic. One, I thought it was like super sad and horrible. All these people have lost their lives to this disease or this virus that just came out of nowhere. But then at the same time, it was an opportunity for a lot of people to finally, I guess, either have like a spiritual or just regular awakening within their self. Yeah, I was one of those people. That's when I quit corporate during the pandemic.
Yep.
I think that's when that term really became, it was already obviously a term for a while, but it came to the forefront, and so many people were using it then. So what are your thoughts about, handling microaggressions in the workplace?
It's funny, I just did a live on this maybe 2, 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, it's very common, especially for people of color in the workplace where you're faced with these incidents and whether they're intentional or unintentional. So like if you research microaggressions, there are different types, right? And I won't go into that because we don't have time for that today, but it's a whole nother thing. But you're in this place and it impacts you. And it impacts it can impact how you show up. It can impact how you deliver. It can impact your mental health. And so many other things. And I think, the thing that I've learned over time is you have two choices. You can do nothing or you can address it. And I think, again, like with everything, right, you have to choose the battle that you're willing to fight, because fighting that battle is also energy, right? And sometimes it's like, it ain't worth it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, I'm going to have this conversation. So I'll give you an example of one. And I actually use this on my live. I talked about this on my live, but I think it's a great example. So I had just gotten promoted to project manager. And one of my first projects, which I was super excited about, was to like restructure a team, redesign this tool that they were going to use. It was like 160 people. And I was like, I know nothing about this area. I know nothing about anything that they do. And so me and my boss, well, actually two of my bosses, my directors at the time, we had to walk to a different building. It was another building, and we were going to meet the people that I would be working under. So the director of that space, as well as the manager of the team that I would be supporting. And I'm not kidding you. We walked into the room, and before I could even sit down, they pull their coats off because it was winter time. My two bosses sit down. The other two ladies were already sitting. The lady, the manager at the time, looked up at me and she goes, well, what is she going to do? Like out loud, in front of 3 executive leaders, straight flat out said, well, what is she going to do? Like, why is she here? So you're telling, like, you're telling me that she can do better than me for supporting my team? And I froze. So when you think about, like, when I think back to like one of my fight or flight moments where I was like, I fell flat on my face and I didn't know what to do, this is one that stands out to me. I literally froze. I couldn't say anything because that had never, no, people whisper and they talk shit behind your back, but like blatantly like challenging me because I'm young, I'm Black, and you don't know anything about me and I'm a woman, like, how dare you? But I couldn't be like, girl, what you do?
Yeah.
I literally froze. And none of the leaders in the room said a word.
They didn't say anything?
Not a word.
Just went on as though it didn't happen.
Went on as if it didn't happen at all. And that was like, and I wish back then, and I was young, I was probably 22 or 23 years old at the time. I didn't have the skills. I didn't know what to do. If I go with the old version, street jest, then I would have went off on this lady and I would have lost my job. But like, as far as like, how do I address this? Do I address this? And we ended up working together for 6 months.
Wow. And did more instances as such like occur?
Actually, no. We ended up actually getting along very well. I went in there and I was like, you know what? I'm going to show you, girl. I proved myself. And guess who ended up taking her job?
Wow. Look at that.
And so, right, like, I had to figure out, like, what am I going to do in this situation? I didn't know how to address her. I wish I did. If I knew then what I knew now, I would have pulled her aside, not in that room. I would have done it separately. And I would have had a conversation with her and I would have said, hey, that was 100% not inappropriate. Yeah. You cannot address me like that. You know nothing about me. And what led you to that in the first place? Like I would have had that conversation with her. And then I also would have had a conversation with my two bosses at the time to say, you guys should have 100% addressed that in the moment. And why did you not? Yeah. And the reality is I think they didn't say anything because they didn't know what to say either.
Yeah. They're probably just taken aback as you were, but just like,
I still to this day love my boss, like my old boss. Like we still have a great relationship. So, and I know that he supports me 100%. Otherwise he wouldn't have had me in the room. But again, so I think you have to figure out, like, is it worth addressing? And then how do you address it? I think there's a time to address it in a room. So for example, like if you're in a meeting room and there are 10 people there and somebody says something or comes at you based on a microaggression, is the time to address it in the room? Sometimes it is. Sometimes you need to pull that person to the side. And if you're pulling someone to the side, here's my advice. Always, always, always tell someone in advance. So for example, if I have an issue with a peer and I'm going to address it because they said something or they alluded to something or they, whatever it is, I would go to my manager and say, hey, FYI, this happened. I want to have the conversation with this person because I feel like it needs to be a direct conversation between us, but I just want to make you aware of it in the event that it comes up. And here's what I'm planning on saying. So again, back to the CYA. And then you can go and address that person and have the conversation if you feel like it's warranted. If you need support in the conversation, then you ask your manager or HR or whoever you feel comfortable with to be in the room. But it's really up to you. And again, it takes practice and building the confidence. But once you get into it, it's easier for you to be like, nah, I ain't worried about it.
Yes.
Or yeah, we're going to have a conversation.
Most definitely. I had my fair share of microaggressions in the workplace too. And your story, I like just talking to you, we have so many similarities within like past situations that we had in the workplace, because I too, at that organization, that was my first like real job out of college. So it's the main one, and then I quit. So I've been an entrepreneur for almost 2 years. So anytime I'm talking about it, I'm always referencing that job because it was like my main job for 6 years. But I'll never forget, similar situation as you. I took a donor on a tour of the facility because as the volunteer services manager, we worked very closely with the foundation department because of course they want to get the volunteers more involved. They want to get more donations from them. But I oftentimes would help them do tours of the facility as well. So I remember I was giving a tour of the facility to a donor. It was a 77-year-old white lady, and we're walking around the hospital. I'm giving her like information about, the specific areas of the department. And I'll never forget that something had occurred, and she was like, oh, wait, didn't we donate this specific, outside seating area? Didn't her organization donate this outside seating area at the hospital? And I was like, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of that, but I will find out and I will let you know. Because I had not been told that they donated that area. I was told somebody else did. So I said, no worries, I'll find out. And she's like, no. Put her finger in my face. I'll never forget. Put her finger in my face and said, no, you're not listening to me. Literally. When I said like, my friends know me too, old Alaina, aka Ali, almost jumped out of the skin and wanted to slap this lady to tenfold. But like, she put her fingers in my face and I said, what you're doing right now is completely disrespectful. And she's like, what? Putting your fingers in my face is completely disrespectful. Like, she goes, in my 77 years of life, I've never been told that putting my fingers in somebody's face is disrespectful. I said, well, I'm sorry that you've never been told that. But in my life, I have been told that. And I'm telling you right now that it is disrespecting me. And then, I just try to like, change the subject to then like move on with the tour, because I still had to continue to walk her around the facility to give her this tour when my blood is boiling now because you just put your fingers in my face. So I just like you said, CYA, cover your butt, went straight back to my supervisor, told her what happened. I also told my supervisor what happened because that's the one who worked in the foundation, and I wanted her to be aware of what just happened with this potential a donor who was going to donate more. And they verbatim told me, this is what made me really realize that I couldn't be there any longer. They told me mission over me.
Huh?
That's what they told me verbatim. They told me that it should be mission over me, that I should have just let it go. I shouldn't even addressed it and told the lady that she was offending me. That term, like till this day, when I say that, it just eats me up, because they really said mission over me. Like, it's not about your individual feelings. It's not about how you feel like you're treated. It's the mission of the company first. And
but you know what the reality is? For a lot of companies, that's that it's not stated in as blatantly as it was, right? Like, I even say this about HR. I'm like, yeah, I love the HR partners that I've worked with over the years, but at the end of the day, I know that they represent the company. It's never going to be me over them, right? And it's kind of the same thing. So it's kind of like an unspoken thing, but I think, in certain companies, not all, like I don't want to say all for sure, but I think the thing of it is like, if you're in that situation, like you did, you really need to assess, does this serve you? Is this really where you want to be? Is this where you want to pour your energy in to help a business or a company or corporation or whatever grow, where they don't care anything, clearly, blatantly come out and say like, mission over me. They don't care anything about you or your success or your well-being or your mental health. And so like, I think a lot of people get scared and they kind of just bite the bullet and they carry that weight. But there are other opportunities out there. Like, you are not stuck. And in the mindset, a lot of people feel like they're stuck, whether it's because of money or whatever the case may be, or just fear to take the next step. and figure out where the next opportunity is. But it's so common. It's so common. And I'm sorry that happened to you.
So I'm grateful it did. Honestly.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, it worked out.
Yeah.
You
Like,
took
you
the
know,
step.
looking back on it now, obviously I think about all the tears leaving that place. I remember just driving there. I would literally wake up because I had to be there by 7. I would drive there sometimes, drive all the way there, 30-minute drive from home, get in the parking deck just to then call out, because that's how badly I started to dread being in there. And once I realized that that was a repetitive cycle for me, or I'm always leaving, I was calling my husband or I was calling my mom crying. I just knew that, like you said, is this going to be conducive to your well-being, to your mental health, to your physical being? And at a certain point, you should always choose you first, but at a certain point in that type of situation, you have to.
Yeah. And I think too, you know, I think some people feel like I can't leave, and that's okay. Like, if you are in a position where you can't right now, that's okay. Devise the plan too, if that's what you want. You know what I mean? Or if that's where you feel like you need to do, if that's your next move.
I know we were just talking about like the pandemic, and that's kind of how this has segued too. But also during the pandemic is when it became such a huge ordeal of having those, like I told you, diversity, equity, and inclusion groups. So do you think as though it's real? Do you think the emphasis on it is real, or is it just, like we said here, window dressing? Because I have
it varies.
Emotions.
It varies. I think there are definitely some corporations who have put out very clear goals and path forwards around measurables, right? That in a few years we'll be able to look back and say, did you or did you not? Like, were you for real or were you not? And have started taking steps to try to improve, right, diversity and inclusion within their corporation. And then I think there are some that are smoking mirrors. Like, as I've had conversations with my clients who work for various different companies, or people that I've had consultations with, or people that reach out to me, I think that, you know, that is something that is very clear. You can tell when it's a smoking mirror, and you can tell when it's for real. And so as you're looking for jobs, or even for the company you're in, if you want to know what their goals are, ask. Look it up. Google it. Are they standing behind it? How do you see it? Are there ERG groups? Are there measurables that they're marching towards? How are they doing against that? So like for the company I work for, there are all of those things, and they report out on how they're doing against those. So I can tell you whether or not it's happening or not. I think the other thing that we have to be realistic in is, like, look how long we've been the way that we are. It's not going to happen overnight. But it's up to us to make sure that we're holding people accountable. If you tell me you're going to do something, I'm going to ask. And not just for me, right? I think about the generation to come after us. I think about those who are coming up right now, and they're getting into the workforce. Like, what I do is no longer just about me. It's about them. And so how am I advocating to make sure that if you told me you're going to do something, that you're going to do it? And when you're applying for jobs, like I tell people this all the time, if you're not asking these questions of the recruiter, of the hiring manager, what is diversity like? What are your guys' goals? Like, what does your team stand for? Like, what are you as a leader stand for? You should be asking those questions. Does the company's goals and what they stand for align with your, your goals and what you stand for?
I love that you just said that, because you realize when you step into like entrepreneurship, that when I have discovery calls or have those sales calls, I always take it as an interview, not of, even though technically sometimes it is, them interviewing me if they want me to be their VA, or if whatever they want me to be their VA coach, but it's also me interviewing them. So why is it that stigma is so normal in the, online, in the entrepreneur space, but when you're working for organizations, it's never really something that's like discussed. You don't know that.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's like, why? But I think, again, because we've just been conditioned that this is how it is. And like, there was a point in time where it's like everybody's foot is on everybody's neck. And now, like, you better do something or you're going to look terrible. And it's like, are you really behind it or are you not? For these companies. And only time will tell. But it won't be overnight. And I think the other thing too is what I look for when I'm having conversations with my clients, or when I look even at my own company, and it's like, if you want diversity and inclusion, how are you placing people in leadership roles? And I mean high up leadership roles that are of color to help you drive that agenda. Like, don't have me come interview with you to be on a diversity group and you have me interviewing with a white man and a white woman about being a Black employee resource group. I don't understand. Like, this is not, so I think, again, like I said, it'll take a little time, but you should definitely be asking those questions for sure.
I love that. What a crazy example too, because I'm telling you, the organization I worked for, that was the case when they finally did start it up.
I was like, excuse me? Are you interviewing me?
Yeah.
I'm being a Black woman and my contributions to this. Like,
you don't even understand. You don't even,
yeah.
You would never understand. Even through explanation, you would still never get it. And I think that's one thing, kind of a random story real quick. I know that we're getting close to our end time, but I always say that, like, I'm actually, my dad is white and my mom is Jamaican. However, it's like, I have to emphasize this all the time, that like, I don't go out into society. What is that show that I love? Like, Dear White People. She said this in there. And now if she's like, she doesn't go out into society one day as a white woman and the next day as a Black woman. Like, no, every day I go out into society, I am viewed as a Black woman. So I think it's even, oftentimes where I know even from my own community at times would be like, oh, you're light skinned, that's why you got that role. Or, here we are now, like, separating ourselves. We're all women of color. We're all, identifying this way. But I think it's also so crazy when you think of it in that manner, because so many people just have different perspectives of what it's like when you are a different shade of brown. But in reality, we're all brown. And I hate that because it's so crazy. So kind of to like, I'm so, like, this was such a great conversation. I've learned so much from you. And I wanted to, one question, and then I want you to tell people how they can work with you. But how do you, I know that you focus mainly saying, like, controlling the things that we can control and focusing on our own destiny. So what would be one major takeaway, other than that you want people to take away from this live, and knowing that they can boost their confidence and how to advance as a woman of color in corporate?
Don't feel like you have to do it alone. That, like, I, hands down, that was the thing that I wish I would have known then that I now know, is that you may be alone on your team, you may be alone in your, like, but you don't have to get through this or learn how to get to the next step by yourself. Like, find someone who can help support you. And again, I talked about mentors, we talked about coaches, like, whatever that looks like for you. Because as you continue to advance in your career, as you continue to climb the corporate ladder, it gets harder. It's not easier. And it's kind of like back to what you said, like, when you were working at the pool, that's one thing, then completely different as you continue to move through. So make sure that you have support, whatever that looks like for you, to help you navigate this and continue to move up the ladder in whichever capacity that you choose.
And if you need that support from Jessica, tell them how they can work with you.
So I know I talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but really I focus on working with women of color who are looking to advance in their career, to get promoted and paid. And kind of how we do that, collectively, is really getting clear about your goals, your mindset, and what steps do you take to actually get there. And so if you're interested in learning more about what I offer in my coaching program, you can feel free to shoot me a DM, or you can click the link in my bio and set up a free consultation. And for that consultation, we literally go through, and it's like, let me know, where do you need support, and let me help you understand how I can help you. So those are 2 ways you can work or get in touch with me.
Love that. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I'm so grateful that we were able to collaborate in this capacity. I look forward to, like, future collaborations and just continuing to see your growth and everything on the gram. Congratulations again on getting married. And thank you so much for, like, all the knowledge that you've given today. That was seriously such a great conversation. And I see why you are in, these director and leadership roles, because you really do. Not only do you communicate so well and have the knowledge behind it, you just have, like, good vibes, good energy, and it doesn't lie. And I can tell, and I'm grateful that we were able to do this together.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And congratulations to you too. Come on, growing that business and coaching.
I know. Blessings on blessings. We both are, and I look forward to seeing all the opportunities for Coach by Jess. I always want to say with. I don't know why, but
Coach with Jess.
Okay.
Or Coach. Yep. That's it.
You got it. So I always love that. Look, grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much. And thank you to the viewers and anybody who's watching the replay. I hope that you've got some golden nuggets, because I definitely have. And just thank you so much for this opportunity.
Appreciate you. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.